Imagine looking at the sky and screaming at the top of your lungs for help, only to hear the echo of your own voice. Imagine a world where the police are the criminals, the judges are bought, and the innocent are hunted for sport. Now, imagine you have a direct line to the creator of the universe, and instead of giving you peace, he tells you he's sending a group of bloodthirsty monsters to wipe your country off the map as a solution. This isn't the plot of a new dystopian Netflix series. This is the raw, uncensored diary of a man named Habakkuk. He didn't just pray, he interrogated God. He didn't just believe, he demanded an explanation. If you've ever looked at the news, looked at the chaos in your city, or looked at the wreckage of your own life and asked, God, why are you just watching this happen? Then stay with me. This 2,600-year-old story is about to hit you right where you live. To understand Habakkuk, you have to understand the smell of fear. We are in the late 7th century BC. The golden age of Israel is a distant memory. The city of Jerusalem, once a beacon of justice, has become a viper's nest. The king is corrupt, the wealthy are crushing the poor, and the law is paralyzed. It's a society in a death spiral. In the midst of this societal rot stands one man. His name is Habakkuk. Unlike other prophets like Isaiah or Jeremiah, who spent most of their time talking to the people on behalf of God, Habakkuk does something radically different, something very American in its boldness. He turns his back on the people and talks to God on behalf of the suffering. He's the original whistleblower of the ancient world. He's tired of the thoughts and prayers that don't lead to change. He wants action, and he's not afraid to be loud about it. The first complaint, why is God silent? Habakkuk 1 begins not with a "Thus says the Lord," but with a "How long, O Lord? How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save?" Can you feel the frustration in those words? This is the core of the human struggle with the divine. It's the silence. For an American audience, we understand the value of a quick response. We want our justice fast, our answers immediate. Habakkuk is looking at systemic injustice. The Hebrew word he uses is chamas, meaning cold-blooded, intentional violence. He sees it every day. He sees the wicked surrounding the righteous until justice is perverted. He asks the question that every victim of trauma, every person who has been cheated, every soul that has watched a tragedy on the news has asked, why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Habakkuk is accusing God of being an idle bystander. He's saying, if you are good and you are powerful, why is this still happening? This is a brave kind of faith. It's not a polite Sunday morning faith. It's a wrestling in the mud faith. He refuses to give God a pass. He demands that heaven account for the hell on earth. The shocking answer: the Chaldeans are coming. Now, if this were a fairy tale, God would say, don't worry, Habakkuk, I'm sending angels to fix everything. But the God of the Bible is not a fairy tale character. God breaks his silence, and his answer is more terrifying than the problem. He says, look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. Habakkuk probably leaned in, expecting a miracle. Instead, God says, I am raising up the Babylonians, those ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings not their own. Think about that. God tells Habakkuk that his solution to the corruption in Judah is an invasion by the most brutal empire in history. The Chaldeans, or Babylonians, were the ancient world's version of a nightmare. They didn't just conquer, they humiliated. They were known for their specialized cavalry, their sophisticated siege engines, and their absolute lack of mercy. They made their own law, they worshipped their own strength. God is essentially saying, you wanted justice? I'm sending a wildfire to burn the whole forest down. The second complaint, the moral paradox. This sends Habakkuk into a tailspin. He's even more confused now. This is the second great theme of the book, the paradox of means. Habakkuk says, wait a minute, Lord, you are holy. Your eyes are too pure to look at evil. So why are you using these pagans, these people who are way worse than we are, to punish us? How can a holy God use a wicked instrument? This is the intellectual and spiritual crisis of the book. It's the struggle to reconcile a perfect God with a messy, often brutal reality. Habakkuk is essentially saying, the cure is worse than the disease. How does this make sense? He's caught in the middle of a geopolitical storm and a spiritual breakdown. He doesn't have the answers, but he does something brilliant. He doesn't walk away. He doesn't deconstruct his faith and leave. Instead, he doubles down. He says, I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. He goes to the watchtower. He's going to wait. He's going to stare into the darkness until God explains himself. And that, my friends, is where the real story begins. Because what God says from the watchtower isn't just an answer for Habakkuk, it's a blueprint for how to survive when your world is falling apart. It's a message that would eventually change the course of human history, from the streets of Jerusalem to the heart of the American Reformation. Imagine the scene. It's a cold, desolate night on the stone ramparts of Jerusalem. The wind whistles through the crevices of the ancient fortifications, carrying with it the distant scent of cooking fires and the palpable, heavy weight of a city in its final days of denial. Habakkuk is there, alone. He hasn't just gone to pray, he has positioned himself. He uses the language of a soldier. I will stand at my watch. I will station myself. This isn't a passive waiting. This is the posture of a man who refuses to move until he gets an answer that matches the gravity of the crisis. He is looking out over the horizon, perhaps half expecting to see the dust clouds of the Babylonian cavalry already gathering. He is waiting for God to defend his reputation. And then, the silence of the night is shattered not by a thunderbolt, but by a command that changes everything. God speaks, but he doesn't start with an apology or a complex theological dissertation. He starts with a job for the prophet. Write the vision. Make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. For us, in an era of instant digital communication, this might seem like a small detail. But in the ancient world, writing something on tablets meant making it a public record. It meant that this word was fixed, unchangeable, and legally binding. God was telling Habakkuk, what I'm about to tell you isn't just a private comfort for your aching heart. It is a cosmic law. It is the blueprint of history. Write it big, write it bold, write it so clearly that a person running past it, perhaps a messenger or a refugee, can catch the message without stopping. God acknowledges the tension we all feel, the delay. He says, for still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. This is perhaps the hardest pill for the American soul to swallow. We live in the culture of the now. We want justice via a viral tweet. We want our problems solved in a 30-minute sitcom arc. But God introduces the concept of the appointed time. He is telling us that justice has a rhythm that doesn't always sync with our clocks. The delay isn't a denial, it's a preparation. Then comes the lightning strike of the entire book, the sentence that would eventually provide the spark for the Protestant Reformation and the foundation of Western Christian thought. Behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by his faith. Let's stop there and dissect this. Because if you miss this, you miss the whole point of the story. God is setting up a binary world. On one side, you have the puffed up soul. The Hebrew word here implies someone who is swollen, someone full of themselves, arrogant, self-reliant. In Habakkuk's day, this was the Babylonian king, caked in gold and convinced he was a god. In our day, it's the person who thinks their bank account, their tech, or their political power makes them invincible. Their soul is not upright because it's leaning on a hollow foundation. On the other side, you have the righteous. And how do they survive a world where the Babylonians are winning? They live by their faith. But here's the nuance. The word for faith here is emunah. It doesn't mean having the right religious opinions. It means faithfulness, steadfastness, grit. It's the image of a tent peg driven deep into the ground that refuses to budge during a hurricane. God is telling Habakkuk, and he's telling us, that when the world goes crazy, the only way to stay upright is to tether your soul to the character of God, regardless of what the headlines say. You don't live by your circumstances, you live by your anchor. But God doesn't stop with a spiritual proverb. He knows Habakkuk is still worried about the Babylonian problem. So, he pulls back the curtain and shows Habakkuk the anatomy of a downfall. He delivers what scholars call the 5 woes. This is God's forensic analysis of why evil empires and evil people always, inevitably, collapse under their own weight. He's showing us that the universe has a moral gravity. The first woe is against extortion and greed. God mocks the person who heaps up what is not his own. He describes it as loading oneself with pledges. Think about the modern debt crisis or corporate raiders who strip mine companies for short-term gain. God says that eventually the creditors will wake up. The people you stepped on will rise up. Evil is a parasite that eventually kills its host. You can't build a life on what you stole and expect the foundation to hold. The second woe targets unjust gain for security. Habakkuk sees people trying to build their nest on high to be safe from the reach of harm. This is the human obsession with building walls, whether physical or financial, thinking we can insulate ourselves from the suffering of others. But God says the very stones of the wall will cry out. There is no fortress thick enough to keep out the consequences of how you treated the people who built it. For an American audience, this is a stinging reminder that our security is a myth if it's built on the exploitation of others. The third woe is the most violent, the woe of bloodshed. God condemns those who build towns with blood and found cities on iniquity. He looks at the Babylonian war machine, the high-tech weaponry of the day, and says, it's all fuel for the fire. Why? Because the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. This is a massive statement. God is saying that the ultimate destiny of the world isn't an endless cycle of war and empires. The ultimate destiny is His glory. Any kingdom built on blood is just a temporary obstacle that will be washed away by the ocean of God's eventual reign. The fourth woe hits home on a psychological level, the woe of debauchery and humiliation. God speaks against the one who makes his neighbors drink in order to gaze at their nakedness. This isn't just about alcohol. It's about power and the stripping away of human dignity. It's about a culture that revels in the shaming of others. We see this in our modern cancel culture, in the pornography industry, in any system that treats humans as objects for entertainment or shame. God says the cup will eventually come back around to the one who poured it. If you live to shame others, you will end in utter disgrace. The fifth and final woe is the root of all the others, the woe of idolatry. God looks at the man carving a piece of wood or plating a stone with gold and saying, "Wake up, teach me." He points out the sheer absurdity of it. An idol has no breath in it. It's a mute, dead thing. For us, idols aren't usually wooden statues. They are our ideologies, our gadgets, our celebrities, our personal truths. We look to these silent things to give us meaning and direction, and then we wonder why we feel so empty. After this devastating list of indictments, after showing that greed, arrogance, and violence are all dead ends, God brings the hammer down with one of the most majestic verses in all of literature. But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him. Can you feel the shift in the atmosphere? The noise of the Babylonians, the shouting of the corrupt judges, the cries of the oppressed, the clanging of idols. It all goes quiet. The watchtower moment has reached its climax. Habakkuk realizes that while the world is a chaotic mess of woes, there is a throne that is not shaking. There is a temple that is not being invaded. God hasn't promised Habakkuk that the Babylonians won't come. In fact, he's confirmed they will. But he has given Habakkuk a new set of eyes. He has shown him that evil is a suicide mission, and that the righteous man's job isn't to fix the universe, it's to trust the one who is already tilling the soil for a future glory. Habakkuk went up to the tower as a prosecutor, ready to put God on trial. He comes down from the tower as a man who has seen the appointed time. He's ready to stop talking and start listening. He's ready to move from the why of the first chapter to the how of the final song. We've seen Habakkuk the prosecutor pacing the courtroom of heaven, demanding answers for the blood on the streets of Jerusalem. We've seen Habakkuk the watchman standing on the cold stone ramparts, waiting for a divine response that was more terrifying than the silence itself. But now, as we enter the final act of this incredible drama, we meet a third version of this man, Habakkuk the worshipper. Chapter 3 is one of the most unique chapters in the entire Bible. It's titled a prayer, but it's actually a shigionoth, a musical term that implies a wild, emotional, and highly rhythmic song. Think of it as the Bohemian Rhapsody of ancient prophecy. It's erratic, it's passionate, and it's deeply visceral. Habakkuk has moved from the intellectual why to the spiritual who. He realizes that if God is who he says he is, then the problem isn't that God doesn't have a plan. It's that Habakkuk's perspective was too small. He begins with a line that captures the essence of the human condition when standing before the Almighty. Lord, I have heard the report of you, and your work, O Lord, do I fear. The prophet is trembling. He has heard the report of the coming Babylonians, and he has heard the report of God's holiness, and both have left him shaken. But then he makes a plea that resonates through the centuries. In the midst of the years, revive it. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. Habakkuk isn't asking God to cancel the judgment anymore. He's accepted that the storm is coming. He's asking for God to show up in the middle of the storm. He's saying, if we have to go through the fire, Lord, please walk through it with us. What follows is a theophany, a poetic description of God appearing as a divine warrior. For an American audience used to the gentle, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus imagery, this version of God is a shock to the system. Habakkuk describes God coming from the south, from Teman and Mount Paran. He describes a God whose glory covers the heavens and whose praise fills the earth. His brightness is like the sunrise, with rays flashing from his hand, the hidden place of his power. But this isn't a peaceful sunrise. Before him goes pestilence, and plague follows at his heels. He stands and shakes the earth. He looks and makes the nations tremble. The mountains that have stood for millennia, the everlasting mountains, scatter like dust. The perpetual hills bow down. Why this violent imagery? Because Habakkuk is reminding himself of the Exodus. He is looking back at how God rescued his people from Egypt, how he split the Red Sea, how he marched through the wilderness. He is using history as a weapon against his current fear. He's saying, if God was big enough to crush Pharaoh and move mountains back then, he is big enough to handle the Babylonians now. He sees God riding on horses and chariots of salvation. He sees the rivers being split, the deep sea lifting its hands in awe, and the sun and moon standing still in their places. This is a cosmic reset. Habakkuk is realizing that the rise and fall of empires like Babylon are just ripples in the water compared to the tidal wave of God's sovereign power. But then, the poem takes a sudden, sharp turn. The cosmic scale shrinks back down to the individual man. Habakkuk says, I heard, and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound. Decay crept into my bones, and my legs trembled. This is the raw honesty we need today. Habakkuk isn't pretending to be a superhero. He's terrified. He knows that the appointed time means his own house will be burned, his own food will be taken, and his own life will be at risk. And here, in the final 3 verses, we reach the summit of the book. This is the moment that separates superficial religion from true watchtower faith. Habakkuk looks at the future, a future defined by total economic and agricultural collapse. Though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls. Stop for a second and translate that into 2026 terms. Though the stock market crashes, though the supply chains break, though my bank account is emptied, though my health fails, though I lose my job, and though my country is in chaos, what is the response? Does he curse God? Does he give up? No. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. The word rejoice here in Hebrew isn't a quiet smile. It's alas. It means to jump for joy, to exult, to spin around. It is a defiant, aggressive joy. It's a joy that says to the Babylonians and to death itself, "You can take my things, you can take my land, but you cannot take my God." He finishes with this, "The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights." Habakkuk began the book stuck in the mud of injustice, crying out from the pits of despair. He ends the book like a mountain goat, sure-footed and soaring above the chaos. He hasn't changed the world, but the sovereign Lord has changed him. He has found a strength that is independent of his circumstances. He has found the feet of a deer that can navigate the most treacherous terrain without slipping. This is the end of the script for the story itself, but the message is just beginning. As the music of the Shigionoth fades out, we are left with the image of a man who is ready for anything because he has seen the king in his temple. As we let the echoes of Habakkuk's final song linger in the air, we have to ask ourselves, why does a dialogue between an ancient Judean prophet and the Creator matter to a person living in the hyper-digital, politically polarized, and often cynical landscape of 2026? Why are we still talking about a man who stood on a wall waiting for an army that has been dust for millennia? The reason is simple. Habakkuk is the patron saint of the unanswered question. He represents the part of us that isn't satisfied with easy Sunday school answers. He is for the person who sees the headlines about war, the rising tide of mental health crises, the corruption in our institutions, and the widening gap between the powerful and the powerless, and says, this isn't how it's supposed to be. What I find most profound about this book is that God never rebukes Habakkuk for his questions. Think about that for a second. In many religious circles, questioning is seen as a sign of weakness or a lack of faith. But in the story of Habakkuk, the questioning is the faith. It takes a tremendous amount of belief to be that angry at God. You don't scream at a God you don't believe is there. You don't demand justice from a being you think is indifferent. Habakkuk teaches us that intimacy with the divine isn't found in a polite, distant respect, but in a raw, honest wrestling match. In my own journey, I've realized that the moments where I felt most connected were often the moments where I was most frustrated. Habakkuk gives us permission to be human. He shows us that faith isn't the absence of doubt. It's the decision to take those doubts directly to the source instead of walking away. Connecting the ancient woes to the modern world. When we look at the 5 woes of chapter 2, we realize that the sins of Babylon weren't just ancient history. They are the DNA of every fallen human system. When God warns against heaping up what is not his own, he's talking to our modern culture of unsustainable consumption and corporate greed that prioritizes a quarterly profit over human souls. When he warns about building a nest on high, he's talking to our obsession with gated communities, both physical and digital, where we try to buy a safety that doesn't exist while the world outside burns. When he talks about the shaming of the neighbor, he is describing our social media landscape, where we feast on the humiliation of others for a hit of dopamine. The Babylon of Habakkuk isn't just a kingdom on a map. It's a condition of the human heart. It is the belief that I am the center of the universe, that might makes right, and that my security can be bought with someone else's blood. The brilliance of Habakkuk's analysis is that he shows us these systems are self-destructing. They don't need a lightning bolt to fall. They are built on sand. So, where does this leave us as we look toward the future? If we are honest, 2026 feels a lot like the days leading up to the Babylonian invasion. There is a sense of an ending in the air. We see the shift in global powers, the rise of artificial intelligence, and the breakdown of old certainties. It's easy to feel like justice is paralyzed and the law is ignored, just as Habakkuk cried out. But the message of this book is a roadmap for the future. It tells us that our job is to write the vision. Our job is to live out a reality that is plain on tablets, a life so clearly aligned with justice and love that people running by can see it and find hope. The future belongs to the righteous who live by faith, not a faith that ignores reality, but a faith that stares at the empty stall and the barren vine and chooses joy anyway. This is the appointed time mentality. It's the understanding that God is working on a scale that our iPhones and 2 4-hour news cycles cannot comprehend. We are moving toward a future where the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. That is the end of the story. Everything else, the rise and fall of empires, the struggles of our daily lives, is just the middle. Habakkuk invites us to live from the perspective of the ending. If you have felt like you are standing on a watchtower lately, waiting for a sign that things will get better, know that you are not alone. Habakkuk is standing there with you. The silence you hear isn't God's absence. It's the quiet before the appointed time. I want to thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of the most powerful, gritty, and beautiful books ever written. Taking this journey through the heart of a prophet is more than just an academic exercise. It's a soul-strengthening practice. If this story resonated with you, if it gave you a bit of deer's feet for your own high places, I'd love for you to become a part of our community. This channel is dedicated to uncovering these ancient truths and showing how they are the only things that can actually hold us together in a modern world. Please subscribe and hit the like button. It really helps us reach more people who are looking for something deeper than just another headline. Share this video with someone who might be in their own chapter 1 right now, struggling with the silence of God. They need to know that chapter 3 is coming. And most importantly, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. What is your watchtower right now? What are the questions you are wrestling with? How do you find joy when the vines are empty? I read every single comment, and I want this to be a place where we can wrestle together. Stay tuned for more stories from the Bible that are far more relevant, dangerous, and hopeful than you were ever told. Until next time, remember, the Lord is in His holy temple. Keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep standing on the watchtower. God bless, and I'll see you in the next story.